It's in motion.
How's it going, Exiles? My name is Ralph, and today I wanted to talk to you guys about a mentality, about a gamer mentality, sort of a discussion analysis video, kind of the philosophy of game design, some weird stuff, talking about the mentality of this always buff, never nerf type stuff. And I've heard this sort of advocated from some streamers who have a pretty decently sized audience base, and I think it's a concerning mindset to have, and it's not necessarily good for the game. I bring this up, I'm not trying to bully you or bully anyone into thinking that my opinion is right and I'm correct. No, I'm just putting my opinion out there. Maybe you can find some truths in my opinion, maybe you can find some things that appeal to you. I just want to get you thinking about it from a different perspective, from maybe a perspective you haven't heard before. So, here's the problem. Always buff, never nerf. That is not a good thing, necessarily. And here's why. That just leads to inflation. Because what happens if you always buff, always buff, always buff? Then things are just always better and better and better. That's inflation. And Path of Exile is not predominantly a PvP game. So it's not like, oh, you buffed this spell for this person, so at least the other person, when facing them, is going to have the same thing. No, the monsters that we fight do not get similar buffs. And this is the danger here. It's just inflated. You see things getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And people are like, never nerf, never nerf. Like, what I hear is, I don't want to have things nerfed. I want to have things buffed up to the level of everything else. Well, if you keep doing that, you're going to end up with things that are just getting better and better and better. It's going to be inflated. You need to have nerfs. You need buffs and nerfs. You know what they call that when you have buffs and nerfs in equal proportion? That's called balance. And yeah, there'll be like a line and things will be above the line, things will be below the line, but you try to stay around the line. When you're always buffing and you're never nerfing, the line just climbs and climbs and climbs, and things are bouncing around it, but it's still getting higher. For example, take a look at skill gems nowadays. I mean, support gems. Take a look at support gems. Control destruction, more multipliers, like nothing. Like it's nothing. Pierce gem, more multiplier. Like it's nothing. It wasn't always like this. Less duration. Like it's nothing. There's a more multiplier. We see more multipliers everywhere. And I'll be honest with you, I thought those were good changes. I thought, yeah, that makes sense. That seems better. That seems fair. The crit strike gem, getting base crit, that's crazy. If you would have brought that up a couple years ago, people would have looked at you cockeyed because that is crazy. These buffs to these support gems, though, if you were to ask me, I would say yes, those are good changes. So I'm an offender too. I feel sometimes that I like it when things get buffed. And then, I think chain should be buffed. I think the less multiplier on chain is too much, especially with the Ascendancy tree. And you see this with Ascendancy, these extremely powerful passives, extremely powerful nodes, DPS that, DPS this. There was actually a piece on the What's Up Wraeclast when they were talking about this power creep. And yes, there's a lot of stigma around that word, but it is what it is. Talking about power creep, and the monster's we're getting all these awesome tools, so what are you guys going to do to make it difficult? And so far, the new difficulty that we've seen is just Izaro and the Labyrinth itself, but that's really it. There hasn't been extreme monster buffs or anything like that. There's just been people getting frustrated because they can't get higher in map tiers, because they're clearing things easier because of the power creep, because they have such strong characters, but they can't get the map drops, and then people complain about the map drops. This problem has been extremely prevalent. They said they were balanced. They said, Rory in the episode of What's Up Wraeclast, he said, we'll try to make the game more difficult in complicated mechanical ways. Like the monsters will do this more, and it'll be mechanically more difficult. But we have not seen this. We have not seen this. The monsters, and he said we don't want to just do like a flat numbers balance. We don't want to just do like monsters do 10% increased damage, monsters have 10% increased health, because that's boring and that's stupid, that's a lazy design. And because we got buffed with all these fun tools. They weren't just, Ascendancy classes were not lazy design at all. It was very exciting design. It's like you get to make your character stronger in really interesting ways, and that's fun. The Ascendancy classes have buffed us in a fun way, but can they buff the monsters in a fun way? And back to the main point, the problem with this always buff, never nerf. This is just a flaw of players. And with this, do you play Path of Exile? Do you play Path of Exile because it's an easy game? No. You play it because it's a challenging game. There's player ego associated in this too. You wouldn't brag about getting to, level 100 if it wasn't difficult. You wouldn't think it was impressive. You wouldn't be like, oh yeah, I got a bunch of this new league, I've already got 2 level 90s, whatever. That wouldn't be impressive if the game was easy. What makes Path of Exile such a good game is that it's challenging. So when you think about things like power creep and like this always buff, never nerf mentality, you're playing with fire. It's a very dangerous mindset to have. People seem to make this assumption and people seem to say, oh, I love game companies that listen to their players. Now, that is a good thing when you have serious things, when it's quality of life and when there's performance issues. Like right now, the game has a lot of performance issues, and that you probably should listen to the players on. That's fine. But when you talk about balance, you really it's dangerous. Because if GGG were to put out a patch note today that buffed the skill that you're using by 50%, you'd be like, hooray! I'm so happy. Yeah. Why would you be happy? Because your character would be stronger, so you could achieve more in the game. Why do you want to achieve more in the game? Because it's important to you. Why is it important to you? Because it is challenging and it feels important and it is actually worth your time. Path of Exile isn't an easy game. It's a challenging game, and that's what makes it worth learning about. That's what makes it worth putting your time into, putting your effort into, and that's what makes it satisfying. If we just always buff and we never nerf, the game will get easy. And yes, I understand it's more popular and it's more approachable and it's easier for new players, but that isn't always what's the most important thing. Do you want mass appeal, or do you want to appeal to those people who want the real challenge, who want the real enjoyment, the real epic gaming experience? That is the priority, and Path of Exile has more users than it's ever had before, and it has gotten easier over time. Because a lot of people have a hard time getting into the game. Because it was, and it still is. It is a very heavily knowledge-based game. But it is because it is a difficult game. And that's the danger of this always buff, never nerf. Because the game gets slowly easier and easier and easier, and slowly your achievements become less and less worth it. Less meaningful, I mean. It's not as impressive anymore to get to level 100 as it used to be. That's a fact. You can't dispute that, because the game has changed. And yes, this isn't to say that GGG never nerfs. And they have showed us with things like Volspark, because did they nerf Volspark? But now, people, are just doing some fancy Voltaxic Rift, Spark, and Poison Spark anyway, and it's still just as broken. And when you see GGG nerf a skill, when they nerf Volspark, that's sort of them telling us, okay, there are some things that just go too far. Like, Volspark was just too much, that's too far. But you still see builds that can clear about as fast as Volspark used to. I mean, what's the difference really? Yes, Whirling Blades are on the whole map. It did have ridiculous clear speed. But still, you see builds that are getting closer to what Volspark's clear speed was with the power of Ascendancy classes. So, is the game just going to get more and more inflated? Are we just going to have more and more Volsparks with this always buff, never nerf mentality? And it's a fault of the players. It's a fault of player mentality. Do you know what happens when game companies nerf things? When they nerf abilities, when they nerf skills, when they balance? What people always say, oh, the game is so poorly balanced right now. You know what happens when game companies actually try to balance, when they actually nerf things? People quit their game. That actually happens. People just quit. And I understand liking a play style and getting so frustrated when it gets nerfed that you can't play anymore, but it's so hard from a designer perspective to listen to the players without losing the fundamentals of your game, without losing the inherent challenge, without losing what is important to the game. And it is a player mindset fault. It is the fault. It is our faults for always demanding buffs and wanting the game to be easier because we want to accomplish more challenges, but then the challenges will be worth less. It's kind of philosophical, and it's kind of more deep in game designy and psychological and stuff. It's a complicated issue. I just wanted to throw my opinions out there. I'm really thankful to you who actually listened to me ramble for this long, who got to this point. I'd love to hear your guys' opinions. The opinions that you guys put in the comments, they impact me a lot. They're very important for me to hear. I like it. It gives me an idea of what other people are thinking versus what I'm thinking, and how maybe I can change the way I'm thinking and sort of get more perspective. Thank you guys for watching so much. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you next time.